So I'm just about ready to take the Jobo out to the darkroom and finally install it. But before I do, I've learned a couple of things since I originally unboxed it that I would like to share. First, this bag of accessories right here. These are spare gears, as should be obvious, but with these extra rollers, apparently there are 3 different configurations that the rollers can be installed in. They all go in the same spot, but it could be these rollers or the ones I put in, and in a few different orientations. And the reason for this is there are 3 different size tanks that you can use. So each tank has a different roller configuration. The next thing I'd like to cover is the hose attachments on the machine. There are 3 of them, and it wasn't entirely clear to me which one gets used for what. I've since found that out, and so I would like to include that information because it's not entirely clear from the manual. This attachment point here on the left side of the machine near the bottom is for draining it when you're finished. That was somewhat obvious before, I just wanted to be extra clear. These 2 ports on the back were where the whole matter got a little bit more confusing, and I'd like to go into more detail. So this spot right here is for cold water filling. I always assumed it was, I just wanted to be absolutely sure. So this you connect a hose thread attachment to and connect it to a cold water supply. It does need to be cold because the machine will fill from there when it needs to cool down the bath. This point here, however, was a spot of major confusion for me because it came out, shot off to one side, and then had this funky T connector on it. So this is for overflow. The idea is that if the water level gets too high, it will drain out of here. Now the problem is that it points to the side. And the reason for that apparently is some bizarre European regulatory issue. I don't know much more about it than that. What this is really supposed to do, however, is to point upwards. Now, there's not a lot of clearance for that, and in order to do it, you pretty much have to over-tighten it, so I'm a little worried about breaking it. Now, it came with this T connector, and the solution that I came up with after talking with some people was to cap off the bottom of this T connector, which I did by basically strapping a piece of bent tubing with some glue in the crease, which I hope will hold, considering it doesn't really need to hold much in the way of water pressure. And then what I'm going to do is angle it outward a little bit and attach a hose here. And the hose from here is going to go to the drain. So I hope that makes sense. This is for cold water filling, and this is for overflow drainage. So without further ado, I think it's time to finally haul this monstrosity out to the darkroom and see about actually hooking it up and powering it on. Okay, I've got the Jobo in here. It seems to fit reasonably well. I may have to shuffle a few things around, but it should be okay. And now I think the next thing to do is to start hooking it up. So let's put this on here, hopefully to prevent any leaks. Sorry if I can't get the greatest camera angle in here, but I finally have the Jobo fully connected. The drain hoses were a little annoying because they're extremely stiff and getting them to stay in the sink was hard. Right now I just have some things on top of them to hold them in place. The fill hose, I think I have connected up well, though I might try to get some kind of L connector to it, because if I move the Jobo any closer to the wall, the hose might develop a kink, and we don't want that. So without further ado, let's power this thing up for the first time and see what happens. To start, let's plug it in. Okay, it's going through self-test. Let's turn on the water supply. Hopefully there's no leaks. Just checking around the back. Yep, I don't see any drips. So now let's get a closer look, and I'll let it go ahead and start filling. I'm going to remove this tank I have on the machine just because we don't need to use it yet, and press the confirm button. Okay, we're about finishing the fill cycle. The bottles are almost completely submerged, and I can see water filling in to the area where the tank is going to go. Hello again. So I ran into a little bit of a snag setting up the Jobo plumbing, and I'd like to go in depth on it a little more because I think the information would be helpful. So as you saw when I originally hooked it up, I connected this hose to the water inlet port on the back, and after it was running for a while, it started to leak. The connection seemed okay, but it clearly wasn't. I originally thought that something about it wasn't making good contact, or there was a leak in the hose itself, but I no longer am certain that's the case. Also, while fiddling around, since I decided I wanted a right angle connection to avoid any kinks, I got this adapter right here, which is a right angle adapter that you can screw in and it goes off to the right. And this actually was even worse. Right around here, it was just oozing water out. So why was this happening? Well, I did some research and came to some interesting discoveries. So the threading on the inlet looks like a standard 3/4 inch hose connection, but it is not a 3/4 inch American hose connection. It is a European connection. They're very similar. Things fit, but the threading is apparently slightly different. So, to solve this problem, I originally thought about placing an Amazon order for the right adapter. It's kind of a rare item in the US, but they were back ordered for weeks. So I went to good old McMaster-Carr. McMaster-Carr has pretty much everything as far as weird fiddly mechanically bits are concerned. So what I wound up getting was a compact extreme pressure steel pipe fitting that goes from 3/4 inch BSPP, which is the British hose connection, female, to 3/4 inch NPT male. So BSPP is the British connection, which is used throughout Europe and other parts of the world, and NPT is the American one. They're very similar. The hoses will actually fit both, but they'll leak if you get a mismatch. So opening the adapter up, this is what it looks like. It's kind of overkill. If I got the cheaper one off Amazon, it probably would be a lot smaller and a lot lighter. This one could probably handle, you know, thousands of PSI or something, which we obviously don't care about. But I have tried it and it does fit. So it also fits a lot more solidly. I also decided to stick some rubber washers in here. These are for hose connections. They sell these at any random hardware store. I'm not sure if they're necessary. It's just that this is kind of long compared to the threads on the back of the Jobo. So I wanted to have at least some pressure helping to hold this in place in this direction. Also, I've decided I'm probably going to abandon these boring garden hose type connections to connect to the water spigot, because they're not quite as solid or leak proof in theory as I would like. They might be fine, but I'd rather not have to worry about it. So I also got one of these. This is the kind of hose connection you'd use to connect a washing machine, which better not leak, unlike a garden hose where nobody cares. It also has a built-in right angle connection. Hopefully the design of this doesn't cause any pressure problems, but if I'm lucky, this will make for a much higher quality setup. Also, as you can see, this actually fits quite well. So let's go ahead and put the pieces together. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is wrap this with a fresh layer of Teflon tape, just to be absolutely sure there's no leaks. When I was test fitting, things actually fit so tightly that it was actually cleaning off some of the gunk from my previous attempts. Regardless, I'm gonna put this stuff on here anyways, just because this is a spot where I really do not want any leaks whatsoever. Now the oversized thread adapter. With luck, I should be able to hand tighten it in place, because I don't really want to break anything inside the Jobo by over tightening it with a wrench. I'm gonna hope that's good enough. Now we're gonna get some more of this Teflon tape stuff on the end of this. And let's get our hose connection hooked up. That's good and tight. Now time to go hook this up to the water supply. On the water supply side here, I have a little bit of a Franken connection, for lack of a better description. So the first item here is a standard backflow preventer that you usually see on hose hookups. I decided to use that so I wouldn't have any weird pressure problems between these pipes when the Jobo solenoid clicked on and off. And sometimes this was actually releasing some pressure out of it, so I think it serves some purpose. The next contraption here is a pressure regulator sold in the RV section of a hardware store that limits the PSI that it'll allow through the line. The limit might be greater than I'd care about anyways, and I can adjust it with this handle. This I just bought in my paranoia over my previous leak problems. It's probably completely unnecessary, but it's here and it's not doing any harm as far as I know. The next thing to do is to turn the water on and see what happens. Okay, now for the moment of truth. I'm going to start by turning the Jobo machine on. Now we're going to turn on the water supply and see what happens. Okay, the water supply is now on. I do not think I see any leaking at all out of this connector, which is very good news, though I'll let it run through a complete cycle of both filling and heating just to be absolutely sure I didn't miss something. Let's start filling the machine, which should trigger the solenoid. Okay, the fill cycle has begun. Let's let it run for a little while and see what happens, especially when it clicks off at the end of the cycle. The first cycle is about to end in 4, 3, 2, 1. We're about ready to begin the second cycle, which I will start right now. In another 2 minutes, this machine should be full with water. As we get near the end of the second fill cycle, I can see some water dribbling out the overflow port. This is not unexpected, and it's good to know that that port is working correctly. I really wish Jobo just used a water level sensor to deal with this problem, but for some reason they decided not to. In any case, we are now completely full with water, and as of yet, I do not see any leaks, so this is an extremely good sign. The next thing that I'm going to do is run this thing through a heating cycle for C41 processing, just to make sure that everything is still good once water is recirculating and being heated. Water is now recirculating in the machine and being gradually heated up to 38 degrees Celsius. This is going to take a while, so I'm just going to let it run, and hopefully everything will still be good when we get back. So the Jobo CPP-3 now appears to be up to temperature, or at least sufficiently. It's reading about 38 degrees here, maybe a smidge less on the thermometer in the simulated chemicals, just water over here, but I don't need it to be perfect for this test. What I am going to be doing though for this test is running it through an abridged C41 processing cycle. I'll probably shortcut most of the steps just in the interest of time, just to put it through its paces and make sure everything's working correctly. As far as the hose connections on the back, my modifications on the water inlet appear to be successful. It's now completely dry, nothing is leaking at all. The overflow connection, however, is a little moist, and I think I just need to add some hose clamps around the clear tubing there to clear that up. It doesn't really experience any pressure, so it's not that big of an emergency. For this test run, I'm going to be using this 2520 drum that's brand new with 2 reels in it, but no film on those reels. The idea really is I just want to wash all this off before I process actual film with it, and because I do plan on processing actual film with it, I want to run through its paces. So let's get started by putting it on the machine. I think we're good, and let's begin our process. The first step of running the process is just a preheat where it runs a dry drum in the water bath just to try to equalize the temperatures. This is specified in the instructions for some sets of C41 chemicals. Some others might specify a pre-wash, but preheat is what's programmed into this machine, so that's what we're going to be doing. Now let's shortcut that step. And it's saying chemical 4 fill, which I believe is the developer. So we'll start by pouring that in. Okay. We're now developing. And we are now done. Remove the drum from the machine, and I think we're done. So this completes a simulated C41 cycle, and everything with the machine appears to be working correctly. Okay, there you have it. That was the complete installation and test run of a Jobo CPP-3 processor. A few important takeaways that I've learned from this experience. The first one, and probably the most important, is that the cold water inlet is BSPP threaded. 3/4 inch size, which is a standard that's available in Europe and not the United States. So if you want to connect any US hoses to it, you need to get an adapter, and this adapter is something that might be hard to find at your local hardware store. So I'll include links in the description to both one that's sold by Amazon and the one that I'm using that's sold by McMaster-Carr. Another thing that I've learned is the power draw of this unit when it's heating up. It actually does use almost 800 watts, so be prepared for that if you want to provide any sort of backup power to the thing. Other than that, I think I'm good to go. I'll probably add some pipe clamps to the various drain hoses as soon as I can. And I'm looking forward to moving all of my film processing in here and onto this machine. So like, share, and subscribe. Leave any questions that you have in the comments, and I'll see you next time.